The last rays of the dying sun painted the Montana sky crimson as Samuel Ward stepped onto his porch, the day's dust clinging to his boots and the weight of solitude heavy on his shoulders. It was then that he saw her, a silhouette swaying at the edge of his property, a woman's form barely visible against the darkening horizon before she crumpled to the ground like a marionette with cut strings. Montana Territory, 1878. Samuel's heart thundered in his chest as he bolted from the porch, his long strides eating up the distance between them. His ranch was isolated, miles from the nearest neighbor, and visitors were rare, especially ones who collapsed at his gate. "Madam." He knelt beside her, his calloused hand hovering uncertainly over her shoulder. "Madam, can you hear me?" She didn't respond. In the fading light he could make out a face streaked with dirt and dried blood, her dress torn and mudded. Her skin was hot to the touch, fever burning beneath the surface. Samuel glanced around, half expecting to see pursuers or companions, but there was nothing but the vast emptiness of the plains and the approaching night. With a decision made in an instant, Samuel gathered her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, fragile as a bird. Her head lolled against his chest as he carried her toward the house, his steps careful but urgent. "Don't you worry now," he murmured, though he doubted she could hear him. "You're safe here." The cabin was modest but solid, a testament to 4 years of hard work since he'd claimed this land after the war. Samuel placed the woman gently on his bed, the only proper place for her to rest. He lit the oil lamp on the bedside table, and in its warm glow he got his first good look at her. She was young, perhaps in her early 20s, with hair the color of chestnuts that had come loose from what once must have been a neat arrangement. Despite the dirt and exhaustion etched on her features, he could see she was beautiful, with high cheekbones and full lips parched from dehydration. Samuel fetched water from the kitchen and dampened a clean cloth. With cautious movements, he began to clean the dirt from her face, revealing a cut across her forehead that had stopped bleeding but looked angry and red. "What happened to you?" he whispered, though no answer came. He checked for other injuries, relieved to find nothing that appeared life-threatening, though bruises marred her arms. Fever was the immediate concern. Samuel knew enough about illness to understand she needed fluids and rest. He'd seen men burn up from inside during the war, had held wet cloths to too many foreheads in field hospitals. After covering her with a blanket, Samuel settled in a chair by the bed. He wouldn't leave her side, not when she was so vulnerable, not when he had no idea what or who had brought her to his doorstep. Night fell completely outside, and he trimmed the lamp, keeping the room in a soft glow that wouldn't disturb her rest. Hours passed. Samuel dozed in the chair, waking at every sound: the creak of the cabin settling, the distant howl of a coyote, the woman's occasional whimper. He refreshed the cool cloth on her forehead regularly, watching for any change in her condition. It was well past midnight when her eyes fluttered open. "Water," she whispered, her voice a rasp that barely carried in the quiet room. Samuel moved quickly, bringing a cup to her lips and supporting her head as she drank in small, desperate sips. "Easy now," he said. "Not too fast." Her eyes found his, green as spring grass and clouded with confusion and fear. "Where am I? Who are you?" "My name is Samuel Ward. This is my ranch about 20 miles outside of Hollow Creek. I found you collapsed at my gate at dusk." He set the cup aside. "You're safe here, miss." She hesitated, wariness evident in her expression. Sophia Miller, Miss Miller. Do you remember how you came to be at my property?" She closed her eyes, pain crossing her features. "I was running. They were after me. I've been walking for days, hiding during the day when I could." "Who was after you?" Samuel asked, concern sharpening his tone. Sophia's eyes opened again, filled with tears. Men from Blackwater. I can't go back there. I can't. Samuel knew of Blackwater, a rough mining town about 40 miles to the east, the kind of place decent folk avoided. You don't have to go back. You're safe here, I promise you that. Relief washed over her face before exhaustion claimed her again. Her eyes drifted closed and her breathing evened out. Samuel remained vigilant through the night, watching over the mysterious woman who had literally fallen at his feet. By morning, her fever had broken, but he knew she would need time to recover her strength. When dawn broke, Samuel moved quietly around the cabin, preparing a simple breakfast and tending to the most urgent of his daily chores. He checked on Sophia frequently, relieved to see color returning to her cheeks. It was mid-morning when she woke again, more lucid this time. Samuel was at her side immediately with fresh water and a bowl of broth he'd prepared. "Think you can manage some food?" he asked. Sophia nodded, attempting to sit up. Samuel helped her, propping pillows behind her back. "Thank you," she said, her voice stronger than the night before. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't found me." "No need to think on that," Samuel replied, handing her the bowl. "What matters is you're here now and you're getting better." Sophia's hands trembled slightly as she took the first spoonful. "I've imposed on your kindness." "This is your bed, isn't it? Where did you sleep?" Samuel gestured to the chair. "I've slept in worse places. You stayed with me all night." Surprise and something else, gratitude, perhaps, colored her voice. "Couldn't very well leave you alone in your condition," he said simply. Besides, a lady appearing out of nowhere with men after her seemed prudent to keep watch. Sophia looked down at the broth. "I should explain." "When you're ready," Samuel assured her. "There's no rush." Over the next hour, as Sophia's strength gradually returned, she shared her story. She had been working as a schoolteacher in Blackwater, having traveled west from Philadelphia with dreams of independence and purpose. The mining town had proven far rougher than she'd been led to believe, but she'd persevered, determined to provide education to the handful of children there. "The trouble started with Emmett Grayson," she said, her voice hardening at the name. "He owns the largest mine and half the businesses in town. He decided he wanted me for his wife, though he never bothered asking what I wanted." Samuel listened, his jaw tightening at the familiar tale of powerful men accustomed to taking what they desired. "When I refused him, he became insistent, said no one refused him anything in Blackwater." Sophia's hands twisted in the blanket. "Things escalated. He tried to force himself on me after the school day ended. I fought him off with a letter opener and ran." "Good for you," Samuel said with quiet approval. "But then he set his men after me, claiming I'd stolen from him. No one would take my word over his." Tears welled in her eyes. "I fled that night with just the clothes on my back and what little money I had saved. I've been running ever since, staying off the main trails, moving mostly at night." 3 days on foot in this country," Samuel marveled. "That's no small feat for anyone, let alone a city-raised schoolteacher." A ghost of a smile touched Sophia's lips. "Determination is a powerful force, Mr. Ward." "Samuel," he corrected. "And I believe you've demonstrated that quite clearly, Miss Miller." "Sophia, please." She finished the last of her broth. "I don't know how to repay your kindness, but I'll find a way. Once I'm well enough to travel, I'll continue on to Helena. I have a distant cousin there who might help me." Samuel took the empty bowl from her hands. "You're welcome to stay as long as you need to recover. Helena's a good 100 miles from here, and you're in no condition to make that journey yet." "I couldn't impose. It's no imposition," he interrupted gently. "And truth be told, I'd rest easier knowing you were safe here than worrying about you on the trail with Grayson's men still looking for you." Sophia studied him, as if trying to discern his motives. Whatever she saw in his steady gaze must have reassured her, for she nodded slowly. "Thank you, Samuel, but I insist on earning my keep once I'm able." "We'll figure that out when you're on your feet again," he promised. "For now, rest is what you need most." The next few days established a routine. Sophia regained her strength gradually, moving from the bed to a chair by the window, watching as Samuel tended to his ranch. He was a man of few words but constant action, rising before dawn and working until dusk with only brief breaks. From her window, Sophia observed him with the horses, 6 fine quarter horses that he worked with a gentle hand and soft words she couldn't hear, but could imagine from the way the animals responded to him. There were cattle too, though not as many as she might have expected for a ranch this size. On the 4th day, Sophia ventured outside for the first time, wrapped in a blanket despite the warm spring air. Samuel was mending a fence not far from the house and looked up at her approach. "Should you be up and about?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "I'll go mad if I stay in that bed another day," she replied with a smile. "Besides, the fresh air feels wonderful." Samuel nodded, driving another nail into the fence post. "Pull up a seat if you like," he said, gesturing to a nearby stump. "Just don't overdo it." Sophia settled on the makeshift seat, breathing deeply of the sage-scented air. "Your ranch is beautiful. How long have you been here?" "Coming up on 4 years now," Samuel answered, his hands never ceasing their work. "Claimed it under the Homestead Act after the war." "You fought in the war?" Sophia asked, noting the way his shoulders stiffened slightly at the mention. "Union cavalry. Enlisted in '62, fought till Appomattox." His words were clipped, the memories clearly not ones he revisited willingly. Sophia recognized the signs of a man who carried burdens from those terrible years. She'd seen it in her own father, who had never fully recovered from what he'd witnessed before a Confederate bullet took his life at Cold Harbor. "My father was with the 6th Pennsylvania," she said quietly. "He didn't come home." Samuel paused then, looking at her with new understanding. "I'm sorry for your loss." "As I am for whatever you lost," she replied simply. They sat in companionable silence for a while, the shared acknowledgement of grief forming an unexpected connection between them. "What made you decide to come west?" Samuel eventually asked. Sophia watched a hawk circling lazily overhead. "After father died, mother remarried rather quickly. Her new husband was unkind. When she passed 2 years ago, there was nothing keeping me in Philadelphia. I'd always dreamed of adventure, of making a difference somewhere I was needed. Teaching seemed the perfect way to do that. And now," Samuel tested the fence post, satisfied with its stability. "Now I'm not sure," she admitted. "But I'm beginning to think everything happens for a reason, even getting lost and collapsing at your gate." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits who had been shaped by hardship but not broken by it. As days turned into a week, Sophia insisted on contributing to the household. Though still regaining her strength, she took over the cooking and mending, skills she'd learned from her mother. Samuel's cabin, while clean and functional, clearly lacked a woman's touch, and Sophia found satisfaction in creating small comforts, wildflowers in a jar on the table, curtains fashioned from spare fabric, bread baked fresh daily. Samuel protested at first, concerned she was pushing herself too hard, but Sophia was determined. "I'm not an invalid, just recovering," she told him firmly, "and I refuse to be a burden." "You're not a burden," he assured her, but he understood her need for purpose and eventually relented. Their evenings fell into a pattern. After supper, they would sit by the fire, Sophia reading aloud from one of the few books Samuel owned, mostly practical guides to ranching and farming, but also a volume of Wordsworth's poetry that had been his mother's. "You read beautifully," Samuel commented one evening as she closed the book. "Your students were fortunate to have you as their teacher." Sophia's fingers traced the leather binding. "I miss teaching." The children were the bright spot in Blackwater, eager to learn despite their circumstances. "Hollow Creek has no school," Samuel said thoughtfully. "Families teach their own as best they can. There's been talk of bringing in a teacher, but nothing's come of it yet." "Really?" Sophia's interest was immediately piqued. "How many children are there?" "Maybe 20 or so within riding distance." Samuel poked at the fire. "Town's growing. The railroad's coming through next year, they say. That would be—" Sophia trailed off, lost in possibility. "Something to consider," Samuel suggested. She nodded slowly. "Perhaps. Though I don't know if I'd be welcome." "Why wouldn't you be?" Sophia hesitated. "A woman traveling alone with no references or connections. People talk, Samuel. They make assumptions." "People here judge by what they see," he countered. "They'd see a dedicated teacher who cares about their children. Besides," he added with the ghost of a smile, "you'd have at least one reference." "Oh, and who would that be?" Sophia asked, though she already knew the answer. "Samuel Ward, rancher and taxpayer," he replied. "My word carries some weight in these parts." "I'll think about it," she promised, touched by his faith in her. 2 weeks after Sophia's arrival, Samuel announced he needed to go into town for supplies. "I've put it off as long as I can," he explained over breakfast. "But we're running low on essentials and I need to check if there's any mail." Sophia nodded, though anxiety flickered across her face. "Will you be gone long?" "Just the day. I should be back by sundown." He hesitated. "Will you be all right here alone?" "Of course," she said with more confidence than she felt. "I've imposed on your routine long enough as it is." Samuel studied her for a moment. "You know how to use a rifle?" The question surprised her. "My father taught me the basics, though it's been years." He nodded decisively. "I'll show you where I keep mine before I go, just in case." After breakfast, Samuel brought out a Winchester repeater, demonstrating how to load and fire it. Sophia listened attentively, handling the weapon with appropriate caution. "I doubt you'll need it," Samuel assured her. "We don't get many visitors out here, and trouble usually announces itself well in advance. But better safe than sorry." "Thank you," Sophia said, returning the rifle to him, "for trusting me with this and with your home." Something softened in Samuel's expression. "You've more than earned that trust, Sophia." The day stretched endlessly with Samuel gone. Sophia kept herself busy with chores, feeding the chickens and tending to the small vegetable garden behind the house. She checked on the horses, though she kept a respectful distance from the corral fence, still somewhat intimidated by their size. By mid-afternoon, she had run out of tasks and found herself watching the road anxiously, the Winchester propped by the door. The silence of the ranch, which had seemed peaceful with Samuel's reassuring presence, now felt oppressive and full of potential threats. When she finally spotted a rider approaching, relief flooded through her until she realized it wasn't Samuel's familiar figure. This man was broader, riding with a different posture on a dark horse Sophia didn't recognize. Heart pounding, she retreated inside the cabin and took up the rifle, positioning herself by the window where she could observe without being easily seen. The stranger dismounted at the front gate, tying his horse before approaching the house. He was middle-aged, with a weathered face partially hidden by a thick mustache and a battered hat. "Hello," he called, stopping a respectful distance from the porch. "Anybody home? Samuel around?" Sophia hesitated, unsure whether to respond or remain hidden. "Name's Mitchell Ross," the man continued when no answer came. "I'm a neighbor from over Clearwater Way. Just needed a word with Samuel about some strays." The name sounded vaguely familiar. Sophia recalled Samuel mentioning a Ross family among his distant neighbors. Still cautious, she opened the door partially, keeping the rifle visible but not aimed. "Mr. Ross," she acknowledged. "Samuel isn't here at the moment. He's gone to town for supplies." Surprise registered on the man's face at the sight of her. "Well now, I didn't know Samuel had company." His tone was curious but not unfriendly. "Miss Miller, Sophia Miller." She kept her hand steady on the rifle. "Samuel should be back by sundown if you'd like to return then." Mitchell Ross studied her with open curiosity. "No need to trouble yourself with that rifle, Miss Miller. I mean no harm. Just surprised to see a lady out here Samuel's kept to himself since he settled this place. Nevertheless, I prefer caution when meeting strangers," Sophia replied evenly. A smile crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Can't fault you for that, especially out here." He touched the brim of his hat respectfully. "I'll catch up with Samuel another time. You tell him Mitchell stopped by about those 3 heifers that wandered onto my south pasture, would you?" "I'll tell him," Sophia promised. Ross nodded, tipped his hat again, and returned to his horse. Sophia watched until he was well down the road before relaxing her grip on the rifle. When Samuel returned as the sun was setting, Sophia met him on the porch, relief evident in her expression. She helped him unload the supplies, telling him about Mitchell Ross's visit as they worked. "Mitchell's good people," Samuel assured her, carrying a sack of flour into the kitchen. "Known him since I settled here. His wife makes the best apple pie in the territory." "He seemed surprised to see me," Sophia observed, Samuel's hand stilled momentarily. "I imagine so. I don't get many visitors, especially not." He trailed off. "Women," Sophia supplied with a raised eyebrow. "Any visitors," he corrected, though a faint flush colored his cheeks. "But yes, I expect word will get around now that there's a woman staying at the Ward Ranch." "Will that cause problems for you?" she asked, suddenly concerned about his reputation. Samuel shook his head. "People around here mind their own business for the most part. And those who don't, well, their opinions don't much matter to me." His matter-of-fact tone reassured her, though she wondered if he fully understood how quickly gossip could spread, even in sparsely populated territories. She had experienced firsthand in Blackwater how a woman's reputation could be tarnished by mere association. "I picked up something for you in town," Samuel said, interrupting her thoughts. He reached into one of the bags and pulled out a package wrapped in brown paper. "It's not much, but I thought you might like it." Surprised, Sophia accepted the package. Unwrapping it revealed a book, a collection of essays by Ralph Waldo Emerson. "Oh, Samuel," she breathed, running her fingers over the embossed cover. "This is wonderful, thank you." "The Mercantile had a small selection," he explained, watching her pleasure with evident satisfaction. "Thought you might be tired of reading about crop rotation and horse breeding." Sophia laughed. "While those are fascinating subjects, I admit this is a welcome change." She opened the book, inhaling the scent of fresh pages. "This is incredibly thoughtful of you." "It's nothing," Samuel demurred, but his eyes were warm as they met hers. That night after supper, Sophia read aloud from her new book, her voice bringing Emerson's words to life in the cozy cabin. Samuel listened attentively, occasionally asking questions that revealed a sharp mind despite his limited formal education. "What lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us." Sophia read, then paused, reflecting on the words. "I find that comforting somehow." "How so?" Samuel asked, his gaze steady across the firelight. "It suggests that regardless of our past or our uncertain futures, what truly matters is who we are, our character, our courage." She closed the book. "I left everything behind in Blackwater and before that in Philadelphia. Yet here I am, still myself, still determined to build a life of meaning." "You're a remarkable woman, Sophia Miller," Samuel said quietly. "Most would have broken under what you've endured." His genuine admiration warmed her more than the fire. "As are you a remarkable man, Samuel Ward. Not many would take in a stranger and show such kindness without expecting anything in return." Something shifted in the air between them, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing since that first night. Neither spoke of it directly, but as they said their good nights, their hands touched longer than necessary, and Sophia carried the warmth of that touch with her into sleep. The next morning brought a change in the weather. Dark clouds rolled in from the west, promising the first real storm since Sophia's arrival. Samuel worked frantically to secure everything around the ranch, bringing the horses into the barn and checking that all was battened down. "Looks like a big one coming," he told Sophia as he came in for lunch, the wind already beginning to howl around the cabin. "Best stay inside for the rest of the day." By mid-afternoon, the storm hit with full force. Rain lashed at the windows, and wind screamed through every crack in the cabin's solid walls. Thunder boomed overhead, startling Sophia despite her efforts to remain calm. "Not fond of storms?" Samuel asked, noticing her jump at a particularly loud thunderclap. "Is anyone?" She countered, trying to smile. "I find them rather invigorating, actually," he admitted. "All that power and energy reminds you of how small we are in the grand scheme of things." "That's precisely what unnerves me," Sophia said, wrapping her arms around herself. "The reminder of how powerless we can be against nature's fury." Samuel considered this, then rose from his chair. "Come with me," he said, offering his hand. "I want to show you something." Puzzled, Sophia took his hand and allowed him to lead her to the front window. The storm raged outside, transforming the familiar landscape into a wild, primal scene. "What do you see?" Samuel asked, standing close behind her. "Chaos," Sophia answered honestly. "Destruction." Samuel's voice was gentle near her ear. "Look again. See how the rain brings life to the land. How the lightning illuminates what's hidden. The storm isn't destruction, it's transformation. Without it, nothing would grow." Sophia tried to see through his eyes to find beauty in the tempest. As she watched, lightning split the sky, briefly painting the world in stark relief: the swaying trees, the glistening wet earth, the mountains in the distance standing firm against the elements. "It is beautiful," she whispered, in a terrifying way. "Most worthwhile things are," Samuel replied. And when she turned to look at him, his face was closer than she expected, his eyes reflecting the storm's wild energy. For a moment, they stood transfixed, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. Then, with gentle deliberation, Samuel raised his hand to her cheek. "May I?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. Sophia's answer was to close the distance between them, her lips meeting his in a kiss that started tentatively, but quickly deepened, as years of loneliness dissolved in the storm's cleansing fury. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer, and she twined her fingers in his hair, anchoring herself against the sensations flooding through her. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. "I've wanted to do that since the moment you opened your eyes that first night," Samuel confessed, his forehead resting against hers. "I've wanted you to," Sophia admitted, though I tried to tell myself it was merely gratitude I was feeling. Samuel brushed a strand of hair from her face. "And now I know better," she whispered, rising on her toes to kiss him again. The storm raged through the night, but within the cabin, a different kind of tempest had been unleashed, one of passion long denied and emotions too powerful to contain. They talked for hours by the fire, sharing stories of their lives before they met, laying bare their hopes and fears in the intimate darkness. "I never expected to find someone like you," Samuel told her as they sat entwined on the small sofa, the fire burning low. After the war, I couldn't imagine allowing myself to care that deeply for anyone again. Loss becomes too familiar a companion. Sophia traced the lines of his face with gentle fingers. Is that why you chose such an isolated place to build your life? Partly, he acknowledged. But mostly I craved the peace. After years of noise and chaos and death, I wanted silence and space to hear myself think again. And now, she asked, echoing his earlier question, does my presence disrupt that peace? Samuel's smile was slow and genuine. You don't disrupt it, you complete it. I didn't realize until you arrived that silence can be its own kind of chaos when there's no one to share it with. The storm had passed by morning, leaving behind a washed and gleaming world. Sophia stood on the porch, marveling at how the landscape seemed renewed, colors more vibrant after the rain. Samuel joined her, slipping an arm around her waist. See, transformation, not destruction. She leaned into him, content in a way she hadn't experienced in years, perhaps ever. You've transformed me too, you know. When I collapsed at your gate, I was running from something. Now I feel like I'm running toward something instead. And what might that be? He asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. A future, she said simply. One I can actually envision now. In the weeks that followed, their relationship deepened as spring gave way to early summer. Samuel taught Sophia about ranch life, how to ride properly, how to tend the garden more effectively, how to predict weather changes from the behavior of animals and the feel of the air. In return, Sophia brought order and warmth to his home and his life. She organized his account books, surprised to discover that despite his modest lifestyle, Samuel had built considerable savings over the years. She started a small herb garden and experimented with recipes that made the most of their limited provisions. In the evenings, she continued reading aloud, their discussions ranging from philosophy to poetry to practical matters of ranch management. They made a trip into Hollow Creek together, a significant step that acknowledged their relationship publicly. The small town consisted of little more than a main street with essential businesses: a general store, a saloon, a small hotel, a blacksmith, and a combined post office and telegraph office. Sophia was nervous about the reception she might receive, but Samuel's calm presence beside her bolstered her confidence. He introduced her simply as Miss Sophia Miller, who's staying at my ranch while recovering from illness. But his protective stance and the way his eyes rarely left her told a different story to anyone observing. The townspeople were generally welcoming, if curious. The storekeeper's wife, Martha Jenkins, was particularly friendly, pulling Sophia aside for a proper woman-to-woman chat while Samuel discussed cattle prices with her husband. It's good to see Samuel with a smile on his face, Martha confided. He's been alone too long. A good man like that deserves happiness. We're just... Sophia began, then stopped, unsure how to define what they were to each other. Martha patted her hand knowingly. No need to explain to me, dear. The heart knows what it wants, and anyone with eyes can see you two fit together like hand and glove. Before they left town, they stopped at the mayor's small office. Samuel had mentioned to Sophia that Jeremiah Powell might be interested in discussing the possibility of establishing a school. Mayor Powell, a portly man with an impressive beard and shrewd eyes, listened attentively as Sophia outlined her qualifications and teaching experience. We've been talking about a proper school for years, he admitted. Got the children growing up half wild with just what their parents can teach them. But finding a qualified teacher willing to come to a place like Hollow Creek hasn't been easy. Miss Miller is highly qualified, Samuel interjected. The children in Blackwater were fortunate to have her, however briefly. Powell nodded thoughtfully. Blackwater, you say? That's Emmett Grayson's territory. Mind if I ask why you left such a position? Sophia had anticipated this question and had decided on honesty. Mr. Grayson made improper advances that I rejected. When he became threatening, I was forced to flee. I've been recuperating at Mr. Ward's ranch since then. The mayor's eyebrows rose, but to his credit, he didn't immediately dismiss her story. Grayson's reputation precedes him, he acknowledged. Not the first time I've heard such accounts. He stroked his beard contemplatively. Still, starting a school takes money. We need to build a proper building, supply books and materials. The families could contribute labor for the building, Samuel suggested. And I'd be willing to donate timber from my land. Powell looked at him in surprise. That's generous, Ward, Samuel shrugged. Education matters. I've seen what difference it makes, having someone like Miss Miller teaching the young ones. The mayor considered them both for a long moment. Let me discuss it with the town council. Can't promise anything, but there's real interest. We've got families moving in with the railroad coming, and they're asking about schooling. As they rode back to the ranch, Sophia was quiet, processing the day's events. Do you really think it could happen? She finally asked. A school in Hollow Creek. Powell's no fool, Samuel replied. He knows the town needs to grow if it's going to survive, and families won't stay without education for their children. He glanced at her. Would you want it? To be the teacher there, I would, she admitted. Teaching is my calling. I've missed it, she hesitated. But what would that mean for us? Samuel reined his horse to a stop, turning to face her fully. It would mean you'd ride into town each morning to teach and come home to the ranch each evening, if that's what you want. The implication wasn't lost on Sophia. Are you asking me to stay permanently? I'm asking for more than that, Samuel said, his voice low and earnest. I'm asking you to consider making a life with me, Sophia. I know it's soon, and I know I don't have much to offer compared to what you might have had back east, but yes, Sophia interrupted, her heart full to bursting. Yes, Samuel, there's nothing I want more than a life with you. His face transformed with joy, and he quickly dismounted, helping her down from her horse to gather her in his arms. I love you, he said simply. I think I've loved you since that first night, watching over you, praying you'd open your eyes. And I love you, she replied, rising to meet his kiss. My protector, my partner, my home. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Hollow Creek. Martha Jenkins had rallied the town's women to create a proper celebration, and the church was filled with wildflowers and ribbons. Sophia wore a dress of pale blue calico that Martha had helped her make, with Samuel's mother's cameo pinned at her throat, a wedding gift from the man who was now her husband. Mitchell Ross stood as Samuel's witness, bringing his wife and their 3 children to the ceremony. Other ranchers and townspeople attended as well, curious to see the culmination of what had quickly become the territory's most romantic tale, the Eastern schoolteacher who had collapsed at a lonely rancher's gate and found not just shelter but love. Mayor Powell performed the ceremony, beaming at the couple as if he'd personally arranged their match. By the power vested in me by the territory of Montana, he concluded, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Samuel, you may kiss your bride. The kiss was brief but tender, mindful of their audience yet unashamed of their devotion. Cheers erupted from the small gathering, and Sophia felt a sense of belonging she hadn't experienced since before her father's death. At the small reception held at the hotel dining room, Powell pulled the newlyweds aside with news. Town council met yesterday, he announced. We've approved the building of a schoolhouse to be completed before first snowfall, and we'd like to offer the teaching position to Mrs. Ward. He smiled at Sophia's new title, with a proper salary commencing once the school opens. Sophia squeezed Samuel's hand in excitement. "That's wonderful news. Thank you, Mayor Powell." "Don't thank me," Powell chuckled. "Thank your husband here. His offer of timber and his vouching for your character sealed the deal. Though I suspect having an educated, cultured young woman bringing civilization to our rough little town appealed to some of the council members' wives as well." As they rode back to the ranch that evening, their ranch now, Sophia thought with wonder the setting sun painted the world in the same crimson hues that had colored the sky the night she'd stumbled into Samuel's life. "Happy?" he asked as they approached the gate where their story had begun. "Beyond words," she replied, "though I keep thinking how different things might have been if I'd collapsed a mile earlier or later." Samuel helped her down from her horse, his hands lingering at her waist. "I prefer to think it happened exactly as it was meant to." "You were meant to find your way to me," Sophia warned. "And you to me," she whispered, linking her fingers with his as they walked toward the cabin that was now truly their home. Summer faded into a glorious autumn. Work on the schoolhouse progressed rapidly, with Samuel often in town helping with the construction after completing his ranch chores. Sophia divided her time between preparing for her teaching duties, creating lesson plans, and organizing the few textbooks that had been ordered and learning the rhythms of ranch life as Samuel's wife. Their evenings were filled with quiet contentment and passionate discovery, two souls who had found in each other the missing pieces of themselves. Samuel marveled at how the cabin had transformed from merely a place of shelter to a true home under Sophia's influence, while she delighted in the strength and tenderness he brought to every aspect of their shared life. News came from Blackwater that Emmett Grayson had been shot in a dispute over a gambling debt. Though he survived, his influence in the town had waned, and the new mine manager had instituted reforms that made the place slightly less lawless. "You ever regret leaving?" Samuel asked when Sophia shared this news. She looked around at their cozy home, at the man who had become her world. "Not for a single moment. Whatever I left behind pales in comparison to what I found here." The schoolhouse was completed in October, a sturdy log building with large windows and a proper slate board. 22 students enrolled, ranging in age from 6 to 16, from both the town and surrounding ranches. On the first day of school, Samuel rode with Sophia to town, pride evident in every line of his face as he watched her unlock the door to her classroom. "Teacher," he said with a smile, tipping his hat to her before leaving, "I'll be back to escort you home at day's end." The school thrived under Sophia's guidance. Her students, hungry for knowledge despite their varied backgrounds and abilities, made rapid progress. Word spread of the quality of education available in Hollow Creek, and by winter, 3 more families had moved to the area specifically for the school. As Christmas approached, Sophia had a special gift to share with Samuel. On a snowy evening as they sat by the fire, she took his hand and placed it gently on her stomach. "I believe we'll be needing another bedroom by next summer," she said softly, watching his expression change from confusion to dawning joy. "A baby," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "We're having a baby," Sophia nodded, tears of happiness gathering in her eyes. "Our family is growing, Samuel." He gathered her into his arms, holding her as if she were made of the most precious material on earth. "I never thought I could be this happy," he confessed, his face buried in her hair. "Never thought I deserved it after everything I'd seen and done." "You deserve every happiness," Sophia assured him, cradling his face in her hands. "And I intend to spend my life making sure you never doubt that again." Spring brought new life to the ranch, calves in the pastures, chicks in the henhouse, and the visible evidence of Sophia's pregnancy. Samuel insisted she reduce her teaching schedule as her condition advanced, hiring a young woman from town to assist her 3 days a week. "You're being overprotective," Sophia protested, though she secretly appreciated his concern. "Guilty as charged," Samuel admitted without a trace of remorse. "And I intend to remain so for the rest of our lives." In June, just as the wildflowers carpeted the prairie in a riot of color, Sophia gave birth to a daughter they named Elizabeth. Rose Elizabeth for Sophia's mother, and Rose for the wildflowers that had been blooming the day Samuel and Sophia had declared their love. Holding his daughter for the first time, Samuel's weathered face softened with wonder. "She's perfect," he whispered, "just like her mother." "She has your eyes," Sophia observed, exhausted but radiant, "and I suspect she'll have your stubborn determination as well." Samuel laughed, a sound of pure joy that filled the room. "Heaven help us all if she does." As summer progressed, they settled into new routines that accommodated their growing family. Samuel built a cradle that could be moved between rooms, and he frequently carried Elizabeth with him as he worked around the ranch, pointing out animals and plants to the infant as if she could understand every word. Sophia watched them from the porch one evening, her heart so full it felt it might burst. Samuel was showing Elizabeth the sunset, his deep voice carrying across the yard as he described the colors to his rapt audience of one. "Your papa is quite the teacher himself," Sophia murmured when they returned to the porch. "Elizabeth will know everything about ranching before she can walk. And everything about literature and mathematics before she can talk, if her mama has any say," Samuel countered, settling beside Sophia with the baby nestled between them. "She'll have the best of both worlds." "She already does," Sophia said, leaning her head on his shoulder as they watched the last light fade from the sky. 1 year to the day after Sophia had collapsed at Samuel's gate, they stood together in that same spot, Elizabeth sleeping peacefully in her father's arms. "I was thinking," Samuel said, his voice thoughtful, "about destiny and chance. What if you'd taken a different path that day? What if I hadn't come out to the porch at that exact moment? What if the world were made entirely of what-ifs?" Sophia replied with a smile. "I prefer to believe in providence. Something guided me here to you, to this life we've built." Samuel nodded, his free arm drawing her close. "To think I almost didn't come west after the war, almost stayed in Ohio, taken up my father's trade." "But you didn't," Sophia reminded him. "You followed your heart then, just as I followed mine when I left Philadelphia. And somehow those two paths converged right here." She gestured to the gate. "At this very spot." "I love you, Sophia Ward," Samuel said, the simple words carrying the weight of all they had become to each other. "And I love you," she answered, rising on her toes to kiss him as their daughter slept peacefully between them, and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Today, tomorrow, and all the days that follow. The years that followed brought changes to the Ward Ranch and to Hollow Creek. The railroad's arrival transformed the small town into a growing community. Samuel expanded his cattle operation, hiring hands to help manage the increasing herd. Sophia continued teaching, though she took breaks for the births of their second and third children, Samuel Jr. and Grace. The small cabin grew as well, with Samuel adding rooms as their family expanded. The original structure remained the heart of their home, the place where their story had begun with a collapsed stranger and a watchful protector. On their 10th anniversary, Samuel presented Sophia with a special gift, a small silver locket containing miniature portraits of their 3 children. Inside the lid, he had carefully inscribed, "To my beloved wife, who found her way to my gate and into my heart." Sophia, in turn, gave him a journal bound in leather, filled with her account of their love story, beginning with that fateful evening and chronicling the decade they had shared. "So our children will know," she explained, "how a moment of desperation led to a lifetime of joy." As they stood together on the porch that evening, watching their children play in the yard that had once seemed so empty and quiet, Samuel pulled Sophia close. "You ever wonder what might have happened if you hadn't collapsed at my gate that night?" he asked, his voice soft with remembrance. Sophia shook her head, her eyes on their laughing children. "No, my love. Some things are simply meant to be.